The Coreweave IPO will be one of the most important financial events in years. Since the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates in 2022, the IPO market has been drier than a British sense of humor, and private equity firms have resorted to playing a giant game of the floor is price discovery in order to avoid selling any of the startups they've invested in out of fear of finding out what they're actually worth. On top of that, we've reached the point in the AI mania where Silicon Valley and Wall Street have to blow harder and harder just to keep that bubble inflated, and many are worried it could be about to burst. It's because of all this that Wall Street is eyeballing the Coreweave IPO the same way Diddy eyeballs a box truck full of baby oil, and since the financial press continues to do little more than print sell-side research masquerading as journalism, somebody has to ask questions about Coreweave. Today we're talking about a company called Sysorex. That's a name that the Coreweave founders would probably prefer remain lost to the annals of history. What's up, guys? I'm Nobody Special, and just a couple of days ago, I saw this video by Risk Reversal Media. That's a podcast and YouTube channel that's run by CNBC personalities Dan Nathan and Guy Adami. And in this video, Dan and Guy are talking with Danny Moses, who's a former trader at Front Point Partners, who was rather hilariously portrayed by Rafe Spall in The Big Short. And you'll never guess which company the Dans were talking about.
We had a little funny spot here, but I want to get real about something.
Here we go.
So when we think about, this is kind of stuck in my craw. We were in this phase, I want to say it was about a year ago. There was some guy on the internet who kept on bringing up this company called Coreweave. Do you remember this? And they
Vaguely,
were, NVIDIA was a big supplier of this. And this is a company that pivoted, you ready from this?
It's not a hair replacement company.
From crypto mining,
Okay. Yeah.
not a hair replacement,
Okay.
crypto mining to generative AI data centers.
Now, I gotta give Dan Nathan a lot of credit here. While most in the financial press have sat idly by and asked no questions about Coreweave, and some have even gone out of their way to tell other people to stop asking questions, Dan Nathan is the one voice in the financial press who has treated the Coreweave story as anything other than a paranoid conspiracy theory by Twitter randos. Now, in that clip, Dan is pointing out how it's a little bit odd that Coreweave pivots from an Ethereum mining company called Atlantic Crypto Corporation to Coreweave, the operator of data centers, and that made me go back and dig a little bit into that transition from Ethereum mining to data centers, and that's when I came across Sysorex. That led me to this one in Global Newswire from April 14th, 2021. That date is important. Put a pin in that. Ethereum mining and blockchain company TTM Digital Assets and Technologies enters into triangular reverse merger with Sysorex. By the way, if you're wondering what a reverse triangular merger is, according to Investopedia, a reverse triangular merger is the formation of a new company that occurs when an acquiring company creates a subsidiary, and the subsidiary purchases the target company, and then the subsidiary is then absorbed by the target company, and I'm more confused than I started. Suffice it to say, this is a very complex merger setup. There are certain tax benefits to doing this. That's not really the point here. Now, coming back to this press release in Global Newswire, we're talking about this reverse triangular merger between TTM Digital Assets and Sysorex. Now, in this merger, TTM is creating a subsidiary. That subsidiary is buying Sysorex and then becoming Sysorex. Now, what does this have to do with Coreweave, you might be asking? And scrolling down, we come to this quote from a Sysorex spokesperson. We also see large opportunities around Ethereum's flexible network that allows users to build and launch NFTs, because that went so well for people who bought NFTs, on top of the framework, which can be stored on the network, and we are interested in exploring optimization of artificial intelligence and deep learning and quick image rendering, I think they meant to say rendering, in partnership with our significant stakeholder, Coreweave Inc. And that's the thing there. Apparently, Coreweave is a major shareholder in TTM Digital Assets. And just look at the reaction in Sysorex stock to this reverse triangular merger announcement. Ticker SYSX. On April 14th, 2021, Sysorex stock would rally more than 1,000% in a matter of minutes, only to immediately begin selling off. Now, you might be looking at this chart and saying to yourself, this really looks like a pump and dump. Well, to that I would say, congratulations, you're looking at the same chart I am. Now, of note here is that monster candle on April 14th and the big wick at the very top of that candle. The sell-off started immediately after the buying spree that was kicked off by that merger announcement. Somebody was dumping millions of shares into that buying spree. And as always, there are clues as to what happened in the SEC filings for Sysorex stock. Take this Schedule 13D that was filed by Coreweave CEO Michael Intrater on that same day, April 14th, 2021. Now remember, that date of April 14th is very important. As of April 14th, Coreweave Inc., up at the top, owned 14,285,000 shares of Sysorex stock. That's important. April 14th, 14.2 million shares of Sysorex stock. Now, we got even more details about Coreweave's involvement in this Sysorex transaction in this Form 10-K annual report that Sysorex filed at the end of 2021. And some of the details in this report are a little bit contradictory of some of the other details that we just saw. Now, on page F35 of this 10-K, we get some very important details. By the way, I'm going to post links to all of these SEC filings in the description down below. For you guys watching on X, you can see them in the comments, so feel free to verify this stuff for yourself. This is all open source. Now, on page F35, we get these details about Sysorex's related party transactions. Effective April 1st, remember that date, the company entered into a variety of contracts with Coreweave Inc. So this is 2 weeks before the Sysorex TTM Digital merger happened. All of these contracts were signed with Coreweave. First, we've got the Asset Contribution and Exchange Agreement. On April 1st, 2021, Coreweave contributed 3,130 GPUs of data mining equipment with 150 gigahash of computing power to the company in exchange for an equity interest representing 28.65% of the outstanding pre-merger equity of TTM Digital prior to the merger transaction with Sysorex for a total value of approximately $12 million. So this is how Coreweave got out of the Ethereum mining business. They traded all of their GPUs that they used to mine Ethereum to TTM Digital in exchange for shares of TTM Digital. And then, of course, 2 weeks later, the merger happens. As a result of the merger and in consideration for the 28.65% ownership of TTM Digital, Coreweave was issued 35,588,548 shares of Sysorex common stock. Now, this is a very different number, 35.58 million shares. Remember, in that 13D, Coreweave only reported 14.2 million shares owned. Now, there's a lot of subtle nuances to SEC disclosure requirements that may explain the difference in the share count here, but suffice it to say, in this 10K, we're finding out that Coreweave took a much bigger stake in Sysorex than we previously thought. And this deal got even better for Coreweave. We've also got this contract for a lease-to-buy purchase order for additional GPUs. We've got a hosting facilities services order that was signed. They've got a services agreement. We've got also a master services agreement where they're going to provide cryptocurrency related expertise, charging them about $35,000 a month to tell them to buy monkey JPEGs. Sounds like a great deal for Coreweave. All totaled, these service agreements were worth about an additional $3.2 million for Coreweave. Again, this was a great deal for Coreweave, not so much for the retail traders who were buying Sysorex stock on this news. Now, immediately upon completion of this merger, it looks like Coreweave set out on dumping their shares. Now, keep in mind, our starting point is somewhat contradictory. We've got one filing that says they own 35.8 million shares as of the closing of the merger. And then we've got this number right here by my head that says they only own 14.2 million. Again, the subtle nuances of the disclosure requirements, but you can tell from subsequent filings that Coreweave was selling shares the whole time. By February of 2022, they had sold off about 20% of that position. They were now down to owning just 11.6 million shares. And by May of 2022, they had sold off several million more of those shares. And beyond that point, they are no longer subject to those disclosure requirements because they hold less than 5% of the company. But it's safe to assume Coreweave's holdings of Sysorex would eventually go to zero shortly after that. And what does that selling look like over time? Well, you get this chart. On April 1st, Coreweave cuts this deal. They trade all their Ethereum mining equipment for TTM shares. 2 weeks later, those TTM shares get traded for Sysorex shares. Retail piles into the stock, bidding up the price by thousands of percent. Coreweave immediately begins dumping those shares over the course of the following year and a half, eventually reaching zero. And as they're doing that, Sysorex stock loses more than 99% of its value, undergoes a 1-for-1,000 reverse split, and ends up selling for pennies on the penny. A few years later, the company would eventually be bought out by a company called Impiction, and the stock is now defunct. Now, there's nothing outright illegal about that. It was Coreweave stock. It was theirs to sell, but I would imagine that comes as very little comfort to the retail traders who bought Sysorex stock all the way up there at the tippy top of that chart. Which brings me back to Dan Nathan and Guy Adami and Danny Moses in this risk reversal media video. Let's listen to what they have to say about the prospects for retail traders thinking about this IPO.
Here's a couple other things that if you are thinking about buying this IPO, and this is Goldman, Morgan, and JP Morgan, okay, they're circling the wagons around this. They need the IPO market to reopen. This is probably not the one you want to do. You know why? They held two large secondaries in 2023 and 2024, a combined $1.3 billion for existing shareholders to sell. Those shareholders, Fidelity, BlackRock, Cotu. You know, those three firms are usually buyers on IPOs. They're not sellers. The other thing is usually there's lockup for existing shareholders like founders, like employees. They can only sell a certain amount of days after the IPO. Well, the three founders of this company sold nearly $500 million stock recently, 2 months before the IPO. So they want to bring this stock to market, yet the natural buyers are actually sellers. And if you were a retail investor, and you like to look out for the retail investor, you'd have to have your head checked if you were going to buy this stock. Is that fair?
Dan, I am so proud. I'm in tears right now, proud. This is why you don't need me here anymore. That was
stop.
That was amazing. Yes, you are 100% right. And by the way, we've been down this road. We've been in the markets before where the bankers are like, guys, get this thing out. Yeah. Can we get this thing done? They might have missed their window, to your point.
Well, based on what happened to the last retail traders who bought what Coreweave was selling, I'm afraid I'm going to have to agree with the Dans on this one. Till next time, live small and dream big.